Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin.
Ella Gilbert, my friend, the queen of men's health. Welcome back. I'm grateful to have you as one of the first guests on a blast of new episodes that I've been doing. So it's been really fun to watch the last couple of years, watch your brand, well, explode. I think the word explode is kind of, accurate because it feels like you're everywhere. You're appearing on big podcasts. I think your message is getting through. I love seeing it. And you and I will be speaking at Raise the Bar I got to give Raise the Bar a shout. We were just talking about Nick and Derek. Dallas, February 21st, 22nd. I hope, any of the coaches who listen will come and join us there. So great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Honestly, it's an honor. You and I talk offline, enough, but to be able to talk in this format is always cool because I get to see your face and bring whatever value you think that I can help with. And, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's all I really have to say.
Well, my cat Ozzy has made an appearance. He's standing in front of us. Oz, get your butt out of the way. Okay, so let's dive right into it. I am deeply distrustful of mainstream headlines media. I just am, right? We know how much they misrepresent or over sensationalize things. Are testosterone levels dropping as much as the headlines claim? Consequences of this, what's causing it? Let's go deeper.
So they have dropped over the last few decades. And I think just like with anything, the media likes to amplify it and make it seem like it's this urgent crisis, which I have to say it kind of is. Because I think there's still so much misinformation out there surrounding testosterone. Because if you think about how long women's health has been studied, like we've been studying birth control, and now we know the effects of that 30 years later since it was kind of coming out. And everyone is comfortable talking about or knowing what menopause is and what happens to women basically from a very superficial standpoint of if they're pregnant or if they get their period, whatever. So we have a deep understanding of people niching down in women's health, whether it's in the fitness industry or the mainstream medical industry, blah, blah, blah. But no one really ever addressed the men or really talked about what's happening with the guys. And I think a lot of the men's health issues are now being brought to the surface and being talked about normally, and we're normalizing that discussion. So you're seeing a lot more of it where we kind of seen a lot of stuff about women's health, but now we're kind of, I don't want to say immune to it, but we're used to seeing that all the time. Whereas now, when I talked about testosterone levels lower and lower, 5-10 years ago, it was like, oh shit, what? Like, and now it's like, oh my God, because it's new for so many people. So there are actual studies that have shown the levels declining, and to satisfy these levels declining, at least in the US, the lab ranges on many of the commercial labs have decreased their ranges of testosterone because guys are showing up with lower and lower levels. So through insurance-based practice in the US, it makes it harder for guys to qualify for TRT. And I think that's also where you've seen the explosion of a lot of TRT clinics, just because the way that they're run, depending on the state, it's very lucrative, but also they're capitalizing on this amplification of guys' test levels dropping significantly, which it is true. It is a statistical, scientific truth. But again, like with anything, the media, of course, is going to play that up in a certain way.
Just to rephrase something you said, testosterone levels are dropping so much that it's become normal. So therefore, normal has been redefined, very much like obesity in our society, right? It's become normalized to your average person is now pretty much overweight at this point. So I guess we have to be alert to the fact that if they're changing the definition of what these things are, that's actually a problem in a way, right? Because we're just normalizing and accepting these things that are outside the bounds of what we, what have been healthy historically. So what are some of the consequences of these declining testosterone levels?
So a lot of the times men typically associate low T with their sexual health and muscles. And that's kind of the general association with testosterone being a steroid hormone and how it's classified and all that. And so any time that a guy thinks about testosterone and he has not experienced any sexual dysfunction and maybe he doesn't care about getting jacked or using testosterone to get jacked, he thinks, oh, I'm okay. And a lot of the other symptoms of low testosterone are going ignored, like brain fog being a big driver of that. It is protective against cardiovascular issues, against cancers, against a lot of different diseases, because it is like a life quality hormone. So just like women need progesterone, estrogen, testosterone in order to feel good and operate well from a health standpoint, guys need testosterone. But because it's attached to so many different stigmas, a lot of men just only associate it with getting jacked or, well, everything down there works fine, therefore I don't think I need it. And so if they do experience brain fog or they're lethargic or they just have this overall like apathetic attitude and they're just not motivated to like win at life, then they think they're depressed. And there are a lot of parallels with low T and depression, but more often than not, they'll be prescribed an antidepressant, or because of these new standards of normal for testosterone, they'll be dismissed by a general practitioner and be told that they're normal and that they don't need testosterone. So then they seek out, how can I feel better? How can I have a better quality of life? Must be some other pharmaceutical drug, must be stimulants, alcohol, like something else, which is the coping mechanism to band-aid a lot of what they're struggling with. And those are really the biggest ramifications for not addressing low testosterone, because I've seen guys where if they have some of those symptoms and it's mostly like brain fog and they just don't have that drive, and then they do go on testosterone, they'll say to me, they'll be like, I have more confidence. Like, is that normal? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, I can make decisions like a lot quicker. And my wife even notices. And I'm like, that's called being a man, which also has stigmas attached to it because of our society. But that is what, like, men have evolved to be leaders and to be decisive and to protect and all that stuff. And a lot of those characteristics have been suppressed due to certain social narratives, but also guys don't realize, like, that's what it feels like to have ample testosterone in your body. Nothing more, nothing less, but they know what it feels like to come from low testosterone. And then once they have where they should be biologically, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I could actually operate as a human again. And it's pretty cool to see.
What's causing it?
Obesity is one of the issues. So like you said, we're normalizing that. So we've normalized shapes and sizes, and health can come in different shapes and sizes, but your blood work will never lie. So no matter what you look like on the outside, and this goes for guys who are absolutely shredded, like just because someone's shredded, has tons of muscles, like, you know, you and I both know people, they feel horrible. They're not the most healthy people. So guys who are not on testosterone and get exceptionally lean and look ridiculous, they might actually have really low testosterone levels. So health is a huge part of it, but obesity does play into a large part of it. Sedentary lifestyle, you know, when you and I grew up, we did not grow up on screens. We were moving around, we were playing outside. So even like social like situations, like we played with friends, you know, kids don't do that. So they don't have the capability to like act as men, as young men when they're younger. And that compounded with obviously food quality, environmental toxins, and all that stuff, that is going to drive this crisis that we're going through with low testosterone, because we're now normalizing low testosterone. Therefore, there's no dire need to change anything, which is really the root cause of changing somebody's behavior. And we all come back to the same stuff of like, get sunlight, go to sleep, exercise, watch what you eat. But it's so boring and you can't market that anymore that no one really wants to address it. But that really is the biggest root cause for this.
Environmental toxins, because you and I come from a world when we hear the word toxins, we also know that like grifters and influencers are pushing bullshit. We'll use nebulous words like toxins as like define the toxin. So I'm assuming one of the big ones is our exposure to plastics. So
Yeah.
talk about that and what other environmental toxins or pollutants are affecting this.
And I used to like totally hate that word. I'd be like, toxins, like what does that even mean? Like it releases toxins from your body. Like, what the fuck? Like, what does that mean? So when I say environmental toxins, I talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals. So our endocrine system is responsible for producing most of our sex hormones. So if that system has an influx of hormones that are not real but are acting like hormones, it obviously messes everything up. And that can come in the form of plastic. So back when it was cool to microwave your Tupperware in plastic because we didn't know any better, now we know better, where those plastics contain fake estrogens called xenoestrogens that are way more powerful than the real thing. So that entering somebody's body is going to mess with the hormones that they already produce. But now we realize they're in everything. So we can't really escape it. Like the minute when someone's born and they get put on plastic tubing, like you just can't really control that. So we're always exposed to it, and people can go deep down a rabbit hole where, EMFs, which are produced through our phones and Wi-Fi and all that stuff, like you can eliminate that from your house or your room, but it's kind of not realistic for how we live nowadays. Flame retardants, certain things produced in the carpets, this detergent, laundry detergent, like all the household products, cleaning products, like there's so many things that contain all these fake hormones that it's overwhelming, and we really can't fight that, but we can do the best we can. And this always comes up where guys are like, just tell me what to do because you're a man. You guys do well with structure. Like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Okay. So if we had to focus on anything, if you're still using plastic Tupperware, switch it out for glass. And same with your drinking water. Like if you're using plastic water bottles, I mean, we can't avoid that if we're traveling or whatever. Like I do that too. But having something that is glass or stainless steel is going to be much better for you. And
I
then
recently replaced my kettle. And I mean, I just thought about this one. I'm like, wait a
really,
second, my kettle was a plastic kettle I've had for years. Fuck. So I went and bought a glass one. And it's the stuff you don't think about. And yeah, I've switched over to glass, Tupperware, that sort of stuff too. It's like, wow, years of accumulation of this stuff. What's the weird one? You see this Muppet, I'll even call him out, Paul Saladino, the one of the carnivore doc or whatever, who is, to the best of our knowledge, not related to our good friend Don Saladino, who's amazing.
yeah,
No, poor Don. This Muppet running around shares your last name. But
I
anyway, so
know.
I've seen Paul and other people talk about like, don't touch receipts. Like, does shit like that matter, or is that sensational nonsense?
So funny story, because I'm a very transparent person. I'll always admit, yeah, I was kind of wrong. So early on, when I would talk about low T, I would talk about almost like 10 different endocrine disrupting chemicals. And then I realized people were like, what in the hell? Like marijuana, lavender, like, to an extent, some of these things can suppress testosterone. But one of the things was receipts. And the picture I always used was a guy using the CVS receipt, which is like 6 feet long, as a scarf. And I would tell people, like, there's BPA on those receipts because they come out like hot and wet from the machine and they hand it to you. And I was like, throw it back at them or just have them put it in the bag or whatever. And then so many people are like, I go to the store and I look like an idiot because I'm like throwing the receipt back. And that was like all they were focusing on. And I was like, okay, this has gotten to a level of ridiculous where it's like, is that the low hanging fruit? Not so much. But if you're going somewhere and touching receipts like all day long, like if you worked as a cashier, that's why I'm assuming they wear plastic gloves now. But they wear gloves to protect from that and like, germs and stuff. But there are things that are a lot more important. And again, it's going to come to the lifestyle stuff because we can't avoid the exposure and the plastics and all that stuff. But I go to CVS, and like if they hand me the receipt, I just kind of throw it in the bag, where I used to be like, oh, I can't touch it. Like, oh my God, but yeah, there is a level to like, okay, how do you want to live your life? Do you want to like take inventory of every single exposure you have to plastic and then eliminate it? Good luck with that. But the big rocks again is like, drink water that is in a stainless steel thing. You know, you can filter your water because there's estrogens from birth control in water sources in America. Switch out your plastic for glass. And then I would say products you put on your body, like for women, or I guess you could say men, like makeup is something you use every day. Shower gels, all that stuff, like they make them so easy to find without toxic chemicals in them. And toxic chemicals would be like phthalates and parabens and stuff like that. Like our my client Nick Kumalatsos owns Johnny Slicks, which they've sponsored Silverback every year, and they have an amazing line of men's shower gels, shampoos, conditioners, beard oils. Like the stuff smells amazing and no toxic stuff in it at all. And that's actually like what I put in my faux hawk is their pomade, because you can pronounce all the ingredients. It's not like a bunch of crap. So if there's something you're putting on your body, whether it's body lotion, makeup, or even shower stuff, you could look to switch that out. And that's a very easy thing to do. It depends on how like anal, I guess, somebody wants to get. Because I mean, I could actually look at all the cleaning products in my house and be like, yeah, that's not great, or that could be better. I just can't be bothered, you know?
What about alcohol?
Alcohol's a big one. And this comes up a lot now with the holidays coming out, where people don't realize how alcohol affects their body composition and their ability to like think clearly and execute life tasks until they take it out. And a big thing with men is they have this thing that my friend Dave Lee's termed like social alcoholism, where it's not the binge drinking that we did at the nightclubs in our 20s every weekend. It's the 1 or 2 drinks multiple days a week that can turn into 3 to 5 that they don't think is a bender, but that does add up, because you and I both know that completely wrecks your sleep. Sometimes it takes a wearable like Oura Ring to see, oh yeah, you suck at sleeping. And this is why, because you're waking up at 3 a.m. because you drink, because you think it helps you sleep, but it actually helps you pass out. But it also has a suppressive effect on fat burning, because when you drink alcohol, your body's like, oh my gosh, this is a bad substance, but it's very quick energy, but I have to metabolize it right away because I have to get it out of the body. So if you eat anything with it, it's like, oh yeah, you are going to stay over here and I'm going to store you because I need to get rid of this energy really quick. And that's how fat accumulation can happen. Plus the inflammation and all that stuff. Like I'm sure you've seen like some of your clients when they just don't drink for a while, they're like, I feel better. I look better.
You take drink, you change nothing else. You get someone resistance training, and then they decide, hey, I want to drink a whole lot less. Magical things happen. I drink substantially less than I did. I used to own a nightclub 20 years ago. Lived pretty wild in that world. And, picture sitting and having drinks and hanging out and partying with Collective Soul in the upstairs room of my bar, 20 years ago, right? Those are pretty wild times. A whole bunch of my like ex NHL buddies would like hang out in the bar all the time. Hockey players, they're crazy
Cool.
fun.
Yeah, you can't really like say no, but
But
unless
now,
you're doing that.
even like, casual drinking, I just, one of my best friends built me a bar a couple of years ago. This gorgeous, he does incredible tile work. He's a craftsman, great vision for the stuff. Put in bookshelves, and I've got my vinyl records up there and books and what have you. The place looks great, and he's the one who recently put turf and redid my basement gym, which looks great. But this bar, and I have this massive pile of booze because people keep giving me booze and I barely drink any anymore. And if I have friends over, they bring their like little 4-pack of craft beers and drink it. Right? I'm like, no, drink my shit. So I just drink so little. And then when I travel, I have certain rules. Like, for example, I can't imagine why people drink on planes. You feel terrible. Plus, I don't want to get up and pee more often on planes. Forget that shit. I actually avoid drinking at concerts. I don't want to miss any of the concert either. So, and if I'm going, I've got a couple of right before I will see you at Raise the Bar. I'm bouncing off Columbus, Ohio, and we're not going to say names because I never say things, but I'm going to be recording in person a pretty big podcast that is filmed in Columbus. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the night before that, I have to go to a concert to see Filter, and I've been a big fan of Filter for 30 years. And I actually talked with Richard Patrick, the lead singer, on Instagram. And because I was able to orchestrate it all to get down there to see this concert, I'll go and I'm going to go hang out VIP with him so I'll get to meet him. and then watch them play, and I have an early morning to get ready for this. I don't want to be drunk or like not slept well for this podcast appearance. It's kind of a big deal. So for me, alcohol is easy to say no to now. Whereas I remember, God, like 2 decades ago, I would think of it as, I remember my uncle who dealt with alcoholism and has gone to AA for years. He would talk about it as rocket fuel. And it's like, oh yeah. And I remember in social situations when I moved to this city 18 years ago, I was like, if I went out to a concert in a social setting, I needed alcohol to function. And so it's a very dramatic change. I mean, it's a long change. And I've had a great relationship with it for a long time, but even still, it's not something I'm interested in doing anymore.
Yeah, it does take away. So like I think the last time I drank, I had one vodka at after Silverback when we were all just hanging out in the lobby, and I was like, I'm literally drinking this to stay awake so I can talk to everybody because I was so tired from, you know what it's like. And 3 days after an event, I was like, I literally need this to just be able to like eloquently speak. And that's it. And it did nothing for me. And now I might drink for like a photo shoot to dry out. But yeah, like on planes, people all the time, like I try to take the first flight out when I travel. And so I always go to the bar to get ice for my water bottle. And they don't open till 7 a.m. So I'm there at like usually 6:30 and they kind of look at me strange. And I'm like, I just need ice. Like I'm not trying to find a drink. I'm not looking for alcohol. And I think there was one time this year where I was flying to some event that I was like, I could probably dry out a little bit more because I'm going to be sleeveless on stage. I was like, I'm going to have a drink. And it was the first time ever I drank at an airport at the Delta Lounge. And I felt like a degenerate, but at the same time, because it was 6, 7 in the morning, at the same time, I felt normal because there's so many other people drinking at that hour that I was like, this is really weird. And I felt like shit. I felt awful on the flight, like just the dehydration and everything. I was like, how do people do this? This is awful. Yeah,
Well, I
I
think they
can't.
live in a constant state of it. And I think this could you probably know more about this, but how many men who deal with low testosterone live in a constant state of low grade, just not feeling great? And then you make some sort of major life change and all of a sudden you get clarity. Like I've got a friend I remember, and he was born with relatively poor kidney function. And then I think in his mid 20s, he had a kidney replacement. And after the fact, I mean, that's not minor shit, mind you, but he said like he just didn't know what good felt like until after the fact. All right, you talked about all these hormone disrupting, endocrine disrupting things, and you mentioned women making changes. So obviously, we've been talking about this through the lens of testosterone, and testosterone is actually kind of more important for women than you realize. But how important is it to be mindful of these things? Because you're talking about oversimplified fake estrogens and powerful ones. So why is this important for women to also be conscientious of?
Yeah, it is. And it's there's a study done by Dr. Shanna Swan. She was on Joe Rogan. She's like this sweetheart of a woman. She wrote a book called Countdown, and it basically is based off the research that she did in 2017. The study was published where it was this worldwide assessment of sperm production in men, and it has declined 60%. And she wrote this book talking about the fertility crisis and how usually, like way back when, it was always thought that if people had issues with fertility, it was the woman's problem. And now she's bringing to light how a lot of it can have to do with the guys. Um, and if you think about it, pretty much everyone knows somebody who's gone through IVF to be able to conceive. And there's a reason for that. And what was wild about this book, like you read this book or any podcast she's done or anything, and you think like, how is this even possible? But I remember her talking about how if a woman is exposed to a bunch of phthalates while pregnant with a male fetus, it can affect his sperm production as a grown man, which is beyond crazy to think about. And people ask me, well, how do you like avoid that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because I also don't study pregnancy and pregnant women because that's not my thing. But the fact that that can happen, I was like, oh my gosh. And she talks about the anogenital distance, which is a distance between the anus and the scrotum, how that is decreasing. And the closer together it is, the more feminized a man is. So she also measured, like they measured that and did statistical data on the length of it and how a lot more men are not exposed to as much androgens in the womb as they used to be because of phthalate syndrome and stuff like that. And lectures and stuff, I would always joke, like every guy is going to go measure his anogenital distance. And I'm like, just remember my initials, because then you can remember what it stands for, AG.
We can
But
call
that
it
was
the
crazy.
Allie Gilbert gap. We can call
Allie
it.
Gilbert gap. Yeah. You know, people send me dick stuff all the time. Why not be known for that too? So I don't mind. The grundle. I'm the grundle, right?
I
She
feel
even
so
says
bad
grundle.
I feel so bad for Charlie, your husband.
I know. He just shakes his head and he's just like, whatever. Like my husband's the most tolerant of all my craziness. But the fact that that's a thing, like how wild is that, you know, to think that that can happen. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of younger men have low T. Like most people would think, yeah, I got testosterone of like a 19-year-old. And I'm like, that's not something to brag about anymore, because I've seen blood work of kids 19, 20, 21, 22. Like it is not where you would think it is. It's not in the 900 plus range. I've seen guys in the 200s, 300s. Like it is not where it needs to be. And this obviously affects how guys experience, like not even, you know, post puberty, but like throughout their young adulthood. Think about the confidence issues and think about like even developmentally, they don't look the same as when kids, when we were growing up, look, or boys, different fat patterns, all that stuff.
I remember there were a bunch of classmates of mine that like I swear they were barely out of junior high and they had 5 o'clock shadows by the end of the day. There's a group of guys that I went to school with up in like, and I grew up more and more. I'm grateful I grew up in like northern rural Newfoundland, right? Like back in, I mean, I was born in 78. So, you know, growing up through the 80s or whatever, my exposure to a lot of this stuff would have been a bit more limited. Not perfect. There's still plenty of plastic we grew up around. Okay. So you talked about effects on women through the lens of like reproduction. But is there anything else like for just women's health day to day that this stuff can also have a negative impact, exposure to plastics and everything else?
I want to say it has to do with the contribution of the rise of PCOS in women.
Okay.
Now, instead of boys having 5 o'clock shadows, women would actually have that because that's like an overproduction of testosterone. And I'm not entirely sure, like, is that something that is hereditary, or is that something brought on by these, the exposure to these hormones? I don't know. Also, part of it with birth control, like, you know, birth control, now that more women are coming off of it or foregoing it, that does suppress testosterone. And then it's very hard to rectify hormonal balance coming off of that. But I have not studied the effect on women to the extent that I would feel credible to give more of an
Fair.
explanation.
Good.
Yeah.
I wanted to give something to the women listening too, but you know, obviously,
Sorry.
no, hey, that's great. I mean, like, hey, you're the queen of men's health. And but
Yeah.
even if it gets women thinking and going and looking further into these things and the implications for them. Okay, so hormone replacement therapy, and particularly from the side of men, not perimenopausal, postmenopausal women's HRT, but obviously there's traditionally a bit of a stigma against it. Do you think that most men would benefit, especially through the lens of declining testosterone rates in our society? And what are the benefits?
I have made reels saying I feel guys will end up on it inevitably, which is a strong statement to make, which obviously brings a lot of the heat that I get online, because I can just breathe on camera and people come at me. So no matter what I say, they're going to take it a certain way. But having seen like thousands of blood work and consults and all this stuff throughout the years, I do feel quite strongly that unless a guy is like completely dialed in with everything lifestyle related, it's very rare to see somebody with optimal testosterone levels, which would be like above 600 and an optimal free level, who is like, I feel amazing, everything is great. It's very rare. So I think we are in this war against obviously all the chemical stuff, but I've seen over and over again where, you know, we do get clients, like it's not something someone has to go on when they come and work with us. Like we have guys who are like, I want to do everything I can to not go on it until I absolutely have to, which I think every man should. Like, absolutely dial in your entire life, because it's not just testosterone that men have. Like, they do have other hormones that they have to address, like thyroid, pregnenolone, DHEA, like all those things. So assessing blood work is one piece of it, and then finding, okay, what is driving this? Are they alcohol? Like, are they drinking alcohol? Do they not sleep? Are they under a tremendous amount of stress, which a lot of guys are? A lot of guys internalize and then want to problem solve, but they don't actually talk about it. And so that will also drive the stress response. And then having less social interactions, sunlight, exercise, all that stuff compounds on top of that. So you see, because of the reasons we talked about before, guys showing up with lower and lower levels, even if they do dial all of that in, you may not see this crazy jump to optimal levels from all that. So it usually gets to the point where it's like, we've tried everything. They still are symptomatic, which meaning, they feel exhausted, like no matter what they do in the gym. And I hate saying they don't gain muscle in the gym, because I don't like people saying, oh, if I take testosterone, I'll get jacked. But it's more like, these are guys that train hard, that eat enough to support the training, and still like nothing is moving the needle. But it's also the mental clarity and just wanting to show up. I want to show up as the best husband, as the best father, as the best employee, CEO, whatever it is. And they just don't have that in them anymore. That is when the consideration to go on testosterone would be warranted. And a lot of guys realize, either I feel amazing, or why didn't I start this sooner? Because they realize the benefit it brings them, not just from a sexual health standpoint, because that's not always a given, or from a muscular standpoint, because there's plenty of guys on TRT who do not look like it from a stereotype. So
at what point, I mean, because people obviously hear TRT and they think steroids, and they get misconceptions. I mean, is the goal of TRT to stay within traditionally normal levels, or can that mean super normal levels? And at what point can you go into super normal levels where it has some potential side effects and negatives?
So TRT would be defined as basically putting a man where he should already be biologically producing testosterone. So the typical range in the US for testosterone is around like it's dropped down to like 180 to like 600 to 800 at the top.
Can you explain also like the difference between the way it's measured? Because there's like saliva, serum, blood. Like, can you quickly touch on it?
The most accurate way to measure it is through blood. Saliva, you're gonna get way off measurements. I don't do it. The only thing that saliva is very accurate for is cortisol, if you're going to do like 4 times throughout the day. Urine is like, you get metabolites, but you still aren't getting the full picture. So serum labs are always going to be the gold standard. Okay. So in the US, we use nanograms per deciliter. I think parts of Canada uses that, otherwise nanomoles or picograms, and this is more Europeans and Australians. But in the US, we use nanograms. And with that range being reduced and so wide, you have somebody who's 27 years old and comes in at 220. If they go through insurance-based care, they can be told, you're normal, there's nothing that we can do. Yet they're highly symptomatic, they feel horrible, all this stuff. Or if you have someone who comes in at, 400, 500, which would seem high in those range, then it's a definite, like, no, now you're seeking steroids. And the difference between going on steroids and TRT is the dosage. So TRT therapeutic dosing is really between, like, on the low end, some guys are like 120 milligrams a week. On the high end would be 300. Very rare do you see guys who are at 300. And the reason they're there is because that's what they need to feel their best. And 300 does not bring somebody to like a 2000 level testosterone. 300 for one guy might only bring them to like 1200, but then 200 might bring a guy to like 1500. So it's very different how guys respond to it. But the best dose for a guy is the one that resolves the symptoms that he's dealing with, and that does not negatively impact anything else in his life. And it's very weird because, like, you know, dealing with insurance-based practice, you're never going to be able to get what you need because they force you to test under 300 twice in a row to qualify. No man should have to qualify based on this arbitrary range. So going through, like, I work with Merrick Health, who's a telehealth clinic who literally only focuses on hormone optimization. Their range starts at 600 and goes to 1400. Whereas a lot of conventional medicine, if you go over 1,000, somehow they think that's bad. The dose has to be lowered, blah, blah, blah. And then I have guys who are like, yeah, my dose went down and now I'm on 100 milligrams or less a week, and they feel awful. So it is very contextual and different for each guy, how healthy he is, what he's dealing with. Like, the healthier a man is, the better experience he's going to have on TRT. The more unhealthy he is, and the more he thinks it's going to solve all his problems and be this panacea, the less fun it's going to be going on. But it can really help a lot of issues that he's dealing with that we covered earlier. But as far as starting dosage, it's always best to start low and titrate up if you have to. But some people are like, oh, I could take like 500 milligrams of test. That would be considered steroid dosing. And yes, 500 would probably catapult someone into the 2,000 to 3,000 range where they probably don't need to live.
Fascinating stuff. All right. One of the other things that's kind of interesting, a little bit of a pivot into something personal. Right? Anybody who follows your media, which I kind of hope they will, you are a woman walking around with abs most of the time, right? And you alluded earlier, like, you know, doing things to like look a little bit more cut. What does that take? What are the trade-offs, lifestyle? What goes into being that lean as a woman, especially?
I'm a chronic undereater, so I'm sure that comes along with it. I used to be able to, like, have an entire birthday cake in my fridge and then just eat it with a fork within like 2 days. Like, I used to be a binger. And for any women listening to this I think will resonate, where the more you deprive yourself of something, the more you're going to want it, obviously. And that goes for anything. Like, if you can't have something, you want it more, whether it's a guy, a girl, whatever. So I did what what most fitness professionals do, but what most women do is over diet for a very long time, try to live on 1,100 calories. And then when you stuck a cake in my face, I would face plant and go through the whole thing. Now I realize that I can actually have what I want when I want and not have to deprive myself, as long as I'm not eating the entire thing. And I don't feel the urge to like eat everything, and I didn't throw up or anything, but it would be bad where I couldn't be in front of stuff because I would just want to eat all of it. So it was a come to Jesus moment where I thought I trained hard. I thought I trained the right way. I thought I was eating enough and doing the right things. And I really wasn't, for what I wanted. So I wanted to look like, okay, that girl's like jacked, not like bodybuilder size, but like small, compact, like, okay, shredded. And I didn't know what it took to get there. And it took eating more for a long period of time to get my body to realize, oh yeah, you're actually giving me the building blocks to make muscles, because you and I both know it requires that to make muscles, so that when you do become leaner, the muscles show. And this happens with men where they're like, I build muscle easily, I just need to get leaner. And then they over diet, and then they increase cardio, lower calories, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, oh, now I'm skinny fat, because they don't have as much muscle as they thought they did. And they just dieted it all off. So going through that and then realizing carbs are my best friend and not to be afraid of them was huge for me. So I've maintained, like, I'm 55 kilos and I've been that for the last 3 years because I'm not afraid to eat carbs. And I know when to not go to the gym when my body's telling me don't go to the gym, how to rest, all that stuff. But I think the years of putting into hard training gives that platform to where I can get away with a little more. Like, the other day I bought like the cinnamon roll cake thing from Trader Joe's, which is delicious, by the way. I don't know if you guys have Trader Joe's up there. Do you have Trader
We
Joe's?
don't have them here. I don't know. You know, it's like every Canadian province is different. I thought like we just got a Krispy Kreme, but I do not understand this. People, I got clients telling me that the line of cars to go through the drive-through for this Krispy Kreme went, I think, down a fairly significant city block. It was like out on this like major roadway. And something I know that we recently got a Chipotle, which actually I'm pretty impressed with Chipotle. It's pretty good and a little overpriced for what it is. But anyway, so that was dealing with crazy like stand-up lineups out the door because there's no drive-through there. We recently just got a Chick-fil-A. So like there's all this buzz about these things, but there are things that we don't have here in Edmonton, Alberta that are in BC, like Equinox gyms, right? I
Yeah.
didn't even think there were any of those in Canada. No, apparently there are some in British Columbia, and I don't know, maybe in other parts. So I thought it was just an American thing. So
No, everything's going like Dubai when I was there had like everything American. I was like, this is interesting, but they didn't have Trader Joe's. But Trader Joe's makes these weird like delicacies and this I love cinnamon rolls. It's like a thing. And I was like, this is great. And I didn't eat the whole thing, but like I slowly ate the whole thing over a week. And I was like, oh, it didn't really do any damage. Now, what is the sacrifice with living like this? It's not drinking alcohol. I don't go out anymore because that was what I did in my younger days is like drinking in the nightclubs, all that stuff. Um, I have a meticulous nature to making sure I get my training in, whether I'm traveling or not. Obviously, I'm, eating the right foods. I make sure I move, like if steps are low, like I go out for multiple walks, walk my dog, like that is part of my entire routine. Sleep as well. Like I'm like you, like I want to get enough sleep if I have a big event. Like it's very rare that I'll sacrifice sleep for something and then have that compounding effect. So there's a lot of attention to that detail. Like when I travel, like I'm Instacarting, I'm making sure I have my protein shakes and stuff that I get sent to my hotel, like all that stuff. I'm so used to it now. Like even holidays, I don't like, we don't do Thanksgiving, Charlie and I. So like that's not like a thing for me. And navigating like events like, Valentine's Day, birthdays, weddings, like all these things that people like that just I've dieted through so many of those events that is just another day. And I think that reframing how people think about stuff really helps because I had this conversation last night where someone said all these events, how do we navigate that? Because you have Christmas, you have New Year's, and then it's Valentine's Day, and then there's all these other things. And I'm like, you got to choose what your celebrations are because there's people during the week that they're like, oh, it's Tuesday, that means tacos. It's Wednesday, that means wine. Like you can find a way to celebrate life from anything, like, a reason to eat anything. But it's kind of like how we were conditioned to eat cereal in the morning. Like just because it's the morning doesn't mean you need to eat cereal. So just because it's whatever day doesn't mean you have to eat that. Like a lot of people don't eat turkey on Thanksgiving. They have something else because that's what they want, like steak or whatever. So I
ask where the
think it,
narrative ask where the
huh?
narrative comes from, right? Ask
Yeah,
what's the historical narrative. I mean, breakfast cereal is marketing, and I'm fine with the occasional bowl of Lucky Charms, but actually, I don't even keep breakfast cereal in my house anymore. I was lucky.
I
I grew
love
up,
it.
yeah, and my parents had me eating oatmeal, every weekday before school, and I still have oatmeal to this day. I would have Fruit Loops on the weekends. I mean, there's this a big fuss about dyes in Fruit Loops or whatever. It's like yeah, if you're eating it multiple bowls a day and low protein and other nutritional content is shit and you're not active, guess what? There's going to be problems there. In a healthy, active lifestyle, if you're mind the calories and you're having a bowl of Fruit Loops, I really don't fucking think that the dyes in the fucking Fruit Loops is going to actually make an impact with all the other shit we talk about you being exposed to. Like, holy shit. But
Yeah,
people like
tell
to
my
demonize.
audience that.
People love to demonize. Let's single out this one thing. This is the bad thing. No, there's like, oh, look at how
Oh
much
my
alcohol you're
God.
drinking.
I
Alcohol.
literally the two I posted on protein yesterday, literally as a follow-up for a reel I did. I said every man should eat 200 grams of protein, just like knowing that would trigger Earth, which it did. And then all the kidney misinformation that's still out there. So I literally took Jose Antonio's studies, put them in a post, and then I had people saying, well, I'm going to listen to the doctors that do the studies. And I was like, this is the scientist that literally ran the studies. Just read the damn
Jose
post.
did
Like,
it himself. I
oh
remember
my God.
they did studies where they had people consuming, was it up to 4 times body weight in grams per day of protein with no
5.
negative side.
Yeah.
There you go to 5. And the only thing that was going on was that people were like begging off because they couldn't fit it all in. It was too hard to eat it all.
Yeah. And I like, because he spoke at Perform Better this year, and so I asked him, I was like, what was like the biggest like side effect, like, because obviously it's like thermic effect that is causing people losing body fat eating over their maintenance in protein. I was like what did they experience? And he's like, honestly, they were sweating profusely, like they were really hot from eating so much. And I was like, oh God, what a trade-off. And then people are like, well, protein's so bad. Like they're still, I'm just like, oh my God, we've refuted this. But no matter what you say on the internet, someone's going to disagree and be pissed off, and you just have to deal with it.
Yep. I could put up a random post about something or other, and then like there's might be one or two comments, people like seed oils, and I'm like, holy shit, no, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. We're not going there. Take a look at the inventory of everything. Start with your booze, your plastic exposure. Those are things you can do a lot to combat all this stuff. If you're interested in more, Allie, where do they find you on your social media?
At the Ali Gilbert, ALI, on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time.
And if someone's like really interested in the deep dive, you're planning your event Silverback Summit again, and you run that in the late fall. Any
Yep.
confirmed dates this coming? Well, I mean, it'd be next year, but
Next year, yeah, probably November again in the fall, and that is basically in a culmination of all my top TRT experts in the world, fitness, nutrition experts, business, like everything men's health related. We talk about dicks, we talk about testosterone, we talk about working out. Like that would be the event to attend to find out more about that.
and you are close with, and you surround yourself with a lot of the leading doctors, physicians, PhDs on this subject matter as well. And you're a great aggregator of this information along with being an expert. So everybody go check out what Allie is doing. And if you are, let's say you're finding this podcast through Allie's media, this is part of and for anybody who's a longtime listener, or even just from my media, this is a emphasis on having a different type of conversation in these podcast episodes than I had for a very long time. This is a 7-year-old podcast. Over 300 episodes are really focused to talk to fitness professionals, coaches, because it was fun. It was fun to have these conversations with people like you. There's an older episode with you, and we talked about that stuff. We didn't talk about the hormone stuff. But going forward, I really want to make sure these conversations are things that are more accessible to the general population, the end user, people like you listening. I know coaches are going to get a ton out of it because this is the same stuff we're talking to our clients about. So you can help me. Please take this. Think of one person who you're like, oh my God, this person I know would love Allie, would love this episode, would love this podcast. Take the link, drop it into a text or a DM and say, hey, please check this out. That would do so much to help me grow this. I really want to make sure this is springboarded. It'll take time, but thank you for being here. I appreciate you listening. And Allie, you're always the best. Thank you. And I will see you in person. Raise the bar. Come hang out with us if you're a coach or even just an enthusiast. Raise the bar, Dallas, February 21st and 22nd.
Yep.